of the board since
Thank you so much.
2000.
Mr. Benzai, Dame Pauline Green, Chair of the ICA, dear colleagues, cooperators, it's always a pleasure for me to be here in Japan. There is quite a long story for myself with Japan cooperative movement. I've been the chair of the ICMIF quite a few years ago, and I remember very well coming here, giving some lecture to cooperative colleagues. So it's again a pleasure to be here in Japan to share, as Pauline was explaining, in a solidarity principle, which is one of the bases of the cooperative spirit, to share with you at this present time you're facing. As our global leader, Dame Pauline said, I believe Japan cooperative movement is right in the right time to go forward and to confront for challenges and opportunities. So I will try to explain you what is my role as a board member of the ICA to do what Pauline did explain, try to help to give all my best to you, all Japanese cooperators, for the evolution of the Japanese cooperative movement. And a part of the things I will explain this morning is not only as being a French banker, being the chair of the International Association for Cooperative Banks, and also the former chair of the insurance sectors, but I'm also involved in the movement as being the chair of the Principles Committee. And that's something which is very important, I believe, for you to rely on for the next steps here in Japan. Just first, to remember the process we've been in since, as remembered just a few minutes ago by Dame Pauline Green, when we discovered we were meeting at that time, it was in Brussels, for the ICA board, when Jie Zenshu asked us, as a representative, as sitting on the board, representative of the Japanese movement, help from the international movement for what was going on or what was expected to come from the Japanese government. So I remember well, it was last year, at the end of spring, we were meeting in Brussels, and we had no real information before that, of course. It was just the start of the process. Mr. Benzai and Jie Zenshu asked us a declaration, a press release, just to tell how concerned we were. And we did more than that. We decided to set inside the board of ICA a group of 3 persons, Dame Pauline Green, our colleague Martin Lowry from the United States, and myself, for a contact and study group. Because, of course, as far as one of our members is asking for help, it is our duty to be there for helping. But we thought it was not enough just to tell. We don't understand, we're upset. We thought it was much important just to come, to see, to understand, and to try to help. Because it is not only a national question, it is a national question. And obviously, I would back what was said, we will not and we cannot interfere with the national question. It is the Japanese questions to decide for the national economic future. But as the ICA is entitled of being the steward of the principles, we have first to check on this question, and I will turn on that point. Not only that, what exactly our chair did explain, our role in the ICA Global is just sharing, telling, okay, this problem, you might find someone there, somewhere awkward, that could help you. That's the first thing we can do, helping each other. So we launched this contact and study group and had the opportunity to come here in Japan early September, spend 3 days meeting many people. And once again, I want to really thank all the colleagues I met during these 3 days trying to understand. I can tell you, thanks to you, I spent a wonderful summertime holidays learning, reading things on, trying to understand what was the characteristics of the Japanese agriculture. And I learned a lot. And of course, the most striking thing for me was the opportunity that I was given to travel. We took train and we went to primary crops in the countryside. And for me, knowing the French countryside, to discover what is the Japanese countryside was very interesting. And of course, I discovered the differences and of course the similarities. The first thing I saw in this primary crop was the burial place, the funeral places. And I was so much surprised. I thought the first thing I would see would be something linked with agriculture. It was not linked with agriculture. It is something which is much more deeper, much more humanity. Take care of the dead persons. To be part of a real life from death, from birth to days, of course. It's not only working for the farmers, for their income. It is important, but it's easy to build up the type of society we want to live in. So co-ops are really at the heart of this process. So, and we produce the contact and study group presented to the ICA board in Quebec during the International Summit for Co-ops, his report. And I will give you a few things that were in this document adopted by the board, and this is the base on which now the ICA is proceeding with all of you, the Japanese cooperative movement. So we said, first, ICA role is not to interfere with the national policy, but we believe ICA role is to back the national movement, any national movement, to work together with the national government. That's the first thing. We're not against anyone. We're just trying to find and help them to find solutions. We all agree with the assertion that there is a need to improve the incomes from the farmers. Good. I do believe everyone would agree with it. I was very interesting because I discovered that last week or the week before here in Japan came a well-known French economist, Thomas Piketty, working on inequality. And I understood his book has been translated into Japanese. And we have to remember who are the poorest in Japan. Some of them, most of them, are farmers. So I do understand why it is important to improve the farmers' incomes. But the question is, how do you proceed? Usually, it's not in pushing down things that you help them to grow. You have to find different ways. So setting new rules has to be very well considered on the short-term, medium-term, long-term effects, and sometimes unintended effects. Because, of course, on the short terms, it might sound obvious that that will be good. What the consequences on the longer term? And, of course, something I want to focus this morning is collaborating with the government, with the Diet, with you first, is try to help the Japanese cooperative movement to really be standing firm firm on the cooperative principles. So in the documents produced in Quebec, we were focusing much on 3 principles, but there are 7 principles, but we were focusing on 3 of them. The democratic process, it is important to remember what differentiates a cooperative from any type of corporation. It's democratic ruling inside the co-ops and inside the cooperative movement. So whatever is said in any local national legislation telling that it is the members first, then the primary co-ops that decides and that work is good. Then, of course, it's not enough to tell it. It's the way it works. That's the first thing. Secondly is autonomy. That's very important. We do believe, if we understand well, that something which is tackled or trying to be tackled by the future legislation is that question of the pyramid inside the cooperative movement, the Japanese agriculture cooperative movement. Primaries, prefectural, and GA Zenshu at the top, and of course the federations. If I do understand well, one of the major concerns of the government is that GA Zenshu would be too much important. What does that mean on the autonomy principle? Is really GA Zenshu acting as a steward of the principle and, of course, helping the global movement to go forward? So we, and Pauline addressed that question of auditing. We are not yet certain, but it's too short for us. We did really understand what would be the consequences of the giving up the auditing of the accounts. It might sound not very important. I do not know. But I'll let you know something which I wonder about, and that's something I said yesterday evening. In France, I'm the vice chair of the Accountings Board, which is a public board working on accountings. So as far as someone speaks to me about accountings, I'm getting a bit nervous. So the question for me is, what will be the accounting standards that will be applied by the auditors? It's not the way of, it's not only auditing which is important. It is on which standards you do the auditing. So in my view, that's one of the key questions that has to be looked at. So then I won't go further on that. It's very technical, but I believe sometimes devil is there in techniques. The third principle we did express concern about is the 7th principle, which is the question of caring for the community, which is a new principle in the long history of the movement. And what I discovered, and what I suppose Pauline discovered, is how much the agriculture co-ops are involved in the community life. Should it be health covers? Should it be, of course, a funeral? Should it be economic activities? Because especially in remote places, we know, even in our countries, that the public money is getting rare. So there is a tendency for the government to cut down budgets for public services. So what is the answer? What is the answer for the people? Let's suppose these reforms would double. Let's suppose it would double the farmers' revenues. Whatever, if they have to spend 3 times more to get access to health services, what is the use of expanding the revenues of some people if ever they have to spend it on services such as health or funeral. So I believe things are very much linked together. So something which we're very keen about at the ICA is the words telling that, compulsory or not, it's not very obvious yet, that some cooperative structure should have to shift and change their legal forms to be listed or private companies. And there, if I can express it, not trying to be as clear as possible, I believe all this problem is not tackled in all the dimensions it should be. It is too much looked at as a legislative law question. These questions are not law questions. They are not legislative questions. It's money questions. Who owns the money and to whom the money will go? We know where the money is now, the wealth. It is a common wealth. It is the wealth of the co-ops. Whenever you get into a demutualization process, you have to be clear. At the end of the story, the money is shifting from someone else to somebody else's hands. So the question is, who is behind this type of crime? That's what always I say. You know, there is in any crime usually, except for maybe mad persons, there is an intention. So whenever you get into a demutualization process, there is an intention somewhere. So what we believe, it is that the Japanese cooperative movement should work more on these economic matters, looking in countries where we have had already demutualization process. And Pauline, coming from UK, knows well about it. So I just want to tell you a short story about a wonderful building, a UK building society, cooperative building society. Its name was Northern Rock. Northern Rock was a very classical British building society, working locally, okay, doing its job. And at that time, it was the time of the great demutualization process during the Mrs. Thatcher's government. And the idea was very, and that will sound something to you. It was to give back money to people, to make them richer. Okay. And what was the idea? We will dismantle the intangible reserves from the cooperatives, the building societies. So the idea was very simple. Just give back, and with huge quotes there, give back to the people of nowadays the accumulated profits of their neighbors' grandparents. Okay. And that's what happened to Northern Rock. So Northern Rock was demutualized, and it was a wonderful spin-off. It went into London Stock Exchange. It was a listed company. It was a tremendous success. They were expanding gloriously. And then suddenly the huge financial crisis came, and they were part of the crisis. They were at the start of the problems. And it was a huge collapse in banking activities. Alas, it was not the only one in UK. And what did the UK government had to do? They had to ask the taxpayer to buy the shares of this company. So the thing we have to consider is, why not considering the question of transforming co-ops into a limited company? But what about the end of the story? In the medium-term, long-term process, ever think of Northern Rock. That's something that's very fruitful, useful. To finish this morning, I want to remember, but I'm sure here for the cooperatives, for the co-opters, you're you know it well. But for the others, first, and it was already said, cooperatives are part of the diversity of an economy, and that's part of the resilience of an economy. That's the first thing we have to remember. One size fits all is never the good answer. Cooperative contributes to economic and social welfare of population. I won't expand on that. And the most important thing is modernization and innovation is not antinomic with cooperatives. I believe the Japanese cooperative movement has to reconquer this idea. You are part of the future. You are not only there to be the keepers of the already settled questions. You are there to be on the side of the Japanese population, the new generations, their need, their requirements. And of course, it might be very inspiring for you to look back and work with us, all the cooperative movement around the world, on the blueprint that was adopted by the ICA at the end of the international year. The next year's guidelines we have. We will publish for the General Assembly, we will have in November in Turkey, guidelines about the 7 principles. And I can tell you the things we're working on, and our Japanese colleagues are part of the process, might be very enlightening. And there are quite other things you could work on. So first, that's 4 ideas I want to push forward there. More economic research than only legislative research. You need figures. I'm a banker. I'm much more interested by figures than only text. Okay, we need text, but okay, where is the wealth? Who is having the wealth? More economic studies to show how strong, how powerful you are. Secondly, work and think of not only accounting auditing, think of cooperative governance audit. This is something which is spreading out in the different countries. For example, in France last year, we have had a new legislation on cooperatives, and all the movement, and it was agreed by the parliament, all the cooperatives in France will, each 5 years, will have a cooperative governance auditing. Not only accountings. Do we really compare with the principles? Do we really compare with the democratic process, autonomic process, and so on? So auditing is not limited to only figures. Thirdly, research and development. That's something that struck me when I read during my holidays all the papers about the Japanese agriculture. I didn't, maybe it's because I only read English, not Japanese, but it was hard for me to read very enlightening documents on what should be the perspective for the Japanese agriculture, and especially for the Japanese cooperative movement there. And of course, Pauline did explain you how tight we are with FAO. And I went into the FAO documentation. There is no much recent public study from the FAO on Japan. It's a pity. I believe it is important to work with FAO. OECD, I'd also checked on the OECD. So the only place recently where it is said something about the Japanese cooperative agriculture movement, is the IMF. Do you really think the IMF persons do understand something about consumption, about agriculture? You can't let only the IMF persons have very much respect for Christine Lagarde, but as far as I know, I don't believe she knows much about agriculture. So you had better try to find good links with OECD and FAO. And the last and the most important in my view, on the principles. Cooperative education. Education is the future. Of course, because education is the way the new generation will be brought up. So there is, I believe there, in the challenges for the future, a huge way for you all together to go forward. So my conclusion for now on is it is challenging. It is a huge opportunity for you to go forward, to demonstrate your really people-rooted movement, and that you are ready to go forward in a sometimes challenging world for all of us. And I believe what we are trying to serve, Pauline and I, is just to be on your side and to help you to go forward for the best for your country, for your people. Thank you.